Hello everyone and welcome to the next episode of Art Side of Life, where I chat with inspiring artists and create various art-related videos. My name is Eva and my guest today is Brian Ajhar, and in this episode you will learn awesome tips for storytelling in your art and why you should show your own unique point of view in your portfolio.
People are getting information from the same sources and they're not being as unique as they could be. They don't all look the same, but there's something about it that tends to be generic, and the point of view isn't there. And it takes time to develop a point of view. It just doesn't happen.
Brian is a character designer, illustrator, and storyteller. His art career has spanned 3 decades, and his extensive and diverse client list includes numerous magazines, newspapers, advertising agencies, corporate clients, and book publishers. His illustrated children's books have been published worldwide in a multitude of languages and have also appeared in the New York Times bestseller list. So please welcome Brian Ajhar and let's get to the interview. So welcome everyone to the next episode of Art Side of Life, and I'm super happy to have Brian here. Hi!
Hey Eva, how are you?
Oh, great. How are you? I'm super happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I'm honored to be part of all these great people you're interviewing. It's nice.
Oh, definitely my pleasure. And let's just dive in maybe to your background. And I really like this question about the childhood and stuff. I would like to know if you remember how your childhood smelled like.
My childhood smells. Wow. Well, I lived in an area that was known for farms. So there were a lot of cow pastures there, so it kind of smelled like cow pastures not too far from my house. So that was something that I remember. It was very much country, farmland, in the center of town, where it had 4 roads going into the center of town, north, south, east, west, and there was a blinker light in the center of town, and that's my father had a store. He was a store owner. He built a store in the center of the town.
Wow.
And he was a butcher. You know, he was a butcher and a grocery store entrepreneur at the time. Yeah. And I lived in that house. We actually moved there when I was 2 years old. So that's where I grew up.
Wow. And so which were kind of your first creative outlets as a child? Did you have a chance to draw on walls or something like that?
My mother tells me that she always noticed an interest in drawing at a young age. And there were a few things that I remember when I was young, being from the early television generation. This is in the 1960s. At a young age, I was influenced by a couple of TV programs. One was showed cartoons out of Philadelphia, and it was called Gene London. And he was the star of the program. And what he would do is show Grimm's fairy tales and read Grimm's fairy tales on his program. And he would actually sit at his drawing table and draw scenes from the Grimms. So he'd be drawing dragons and princes and a villain and a witch, and that was the first time that I really remember that I saw somebody make something out of his line. Visually, I was actually doing it and telling a story along the way. That along with all the Disney films, that was a major influence early on.
And was this already the time when you decided that you want to take the art professionally, or it was later?
No, I'm talking about 6 years old.
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah. But some kids already know, like, yes, this will be my profession.
No, I didn't look at Gene London and say, I'm going to do that. I was like 5 or 6, but I was impacted, and I still remember it. And then during the Disney time, though, I was growing up. I was probably 8, 9. Definitely was interested in when they had the program. At the time, there were no VCRs. There was no internet. You could only see it one time a week. And what happened was periodically, every time they went behind the scenes, probably once or twice a year, I wanted to see that episode. And I was fascinated with all the animators. And they would go back and interview Mark Davis and Ollie Johnson and Frank Thomas. And I would always sit there glued, like trying to understand what they were talking about, drawing characters. And, they would always have like sequences of their character moving. And I always wanted to understand how that worked, So that was an exciting thing that it's implanted into my brain. So I remember those things. Yeah.
And so did you have maybe some books which you liked about the artworks at the time, or like something maybe you found in the library, or if you got as a present?
I remember my mother used to read to me Grimm's fairy tales. Some of them were very scary.
Yeah, they are actually really
yeah, they
disturbing.
might not have been the actual Grimm, but it might have been like a storybook version of the Grimm, so they altered things. It wasn't as violent. If you read the real Grimms, it's loaded with blood and gore. But I remember really enjoying the idea of a fairy tale and a story. So that was my earliest remembrance of book influence.
Yeah, and so when was the time when you decided, okay, you want to study art? Was it like on a high school and when you were deciding to go to university, or like maybe did you find some mentor who helped you along the way? Like, okay, maybe I want to be like this person later on in my career?
Right. Well, I had positive influences from an art teacher who took an interest when I was in high school. I was never the best artist. There was always somebody there that I'd look at their work and I would think, wow, how do you do that? It was amazing. They would do pastels and I would be doing, pencil drawings or pen drawings and in my notebooks, and I would get in trouble, in class. And the art teacher said to me, he goes, well, why don't you, try to do some work for the school newspaper? So at that time, I started doing drawings for the school newspaper. And my job was to do caricatures of the teachers and the athletic people, like the coaches. And I had to go around and get the drawings accepted by all of them. And some of them absolutely hated. They would not let me even leave the room with it. They wanted. And other ones said, sure. But I remember at the time that it was the first time that I felt that people were giving me a positive response for my work, other than my parents. And that was exciting to me. It made me feel like, geez, I'm doing something I like doing, and I'm getting a response, a positive thing, feedback from, a lot of the students. So it gave me kind of an identity. Yeah. And this was high school. This was, my third year in high school, my junior year in high school. So that was the first time that happened, and that made me think about, wow, I'm gonna try to make a career out of doing this.
And so did you find your mentor already in high school, or it was later on someone maybe who showed you like technical stuff, or like how it is actually in the art career world? Because then social media were not big at that time. So how did you find out what you can live from, basically?
Yeah, basically it was after high school. I went to a 2-year community college, and I studied with a local painter who had a major impact on me. He helped me understand how to paint. He used to do demonstrations and used to show me how to set up a palette, how to work on certain colors and how to mix colors. So that technically, he's one of the guys that motivated me with materials and taught me how to experiment. And I'm a big time experimenter. I've been experimenting at a very young age, mixing materials but that was a time where I was kind of developing how I painted. And then when I went and he also suggested that I go to a professional art school, because that I could only go so far with what they had to offer. So he was one of the guys that encouraged me to go to Parsons. I went to Parsons School of Design, and I went there for 3 years. And I had other teachers there, a couple in particular, that carried me on, to the professional area, teaching me more about drawing and understanding story and telling. Having your images tell a story, and how to communicate ideas. That was something that I learned there that I learned to carry on to professional.
Yeah, and so what would you think is the best advice you got at the time when you were developing your art style and just progressing in your career?
The best art advice?
Yeah, or life advice, or whatever it was related
The
to
best,
you.
the best life advice was I had one teacher that discouraged me from going to a professional art school. He
Okay.
was like, why don't you go to this one? That's kind of an inferior school that what you would be good at, maybe you could be a teacher,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then the one I was telling you about said, if you want to be a professional, you go to a professional school. He goes, you're good enough.
yeah,
Go do it. Go after it. And I ran with it. I never forgot that. And he just gave me that advice at the right time. So, and he said, you got to go to New York. At the time, that was the place to be.
yeah.
So I went to New York. I was there for 13, 14 years afterwards.
Wow. So how was the getting the first job after university? Like, yeah, what was maybe the networking at the time, or who offered you the job, or where did they find you?
Well, I had jobs when I was going to school.
Already, yeah.
Yeah, but the jobs I'm talking about was it was a new newspaper, supposed to be a competitor with the Village Voice at the time, and it was called City Choice Newspaper, and I did the illustration, and there was a cover for the premiere issue of the City Choice newspaper. So I did city scene with all these characters going around and all these things happening with taxi cabs and people everywhere, and it was a funny drawing, and so it published, and it was the fee was the fee was $15 to do the cover, and
Perfect.
I didn't get paid. I didn't get paid. He didn't have enough money to pay me, so that was my very, very first cover. That doesn't really count, but that was my first. When I get out of school, you had friends that you graduated with, and you're networking, and at the time, you could actually call up an art director on the phone, and I remember making my first cold call. Can I show you my work? And I remember I was like terrified. I was shaking. I was so nervous talking to somebody. But what would happen was that was my junior year in high school. So over the summer, I met. I stayed in the city all summer, and I met people to show my portfolio
Yeah.
to them, not going after a job, but getting comments and criticism. So I must have had like 20 different interviews before I went to my last year in school.
Yeah.
And they would give me feedback on my work. And every time I went in, I asked them if they have anybody interested, would they know anybody or any friend that would be interested in seeing this? And they would give me 2 names. And then I'd go to them and they would give me 2 names. And then it just snowballed, and you finally when you were out, you had plenty of contacts,
Yeah.
that you could go. So that's kind of how it's happened.
Yeah, definitely. And after that, which are kind of like the biggest turning points, where got you in your career where you are now, like different projects you were the most excited about, and if you can highlight some of these things?
The biggest turning point, probably being in New York and moving to New York was the biggest turning point.
Yeah.
As far as jobs, it kind of, the way it worked was you would get a job, somebody would see it, and then you would get called for 2 jobs. And then more people would see that, and then you would get called for some more jobs. I came into the business in 1980, the end of 1980. And at the time, there was the economy was good. It was starting to get good. And there was an explosion of business magazines and computer magazines.
Yeah.
And I started to get calls from business magazines and computer magazines, and there was like an endless list of magazines that needed illustration. And me and a couple of friends at the time were getting work in the same areas, and it was pretty constant. Peter DeSev is a friend of mine, and we actually lived in the same building at the time.
Oh, really?
And talking about clients and going out for coffee in the middle of the night and exchanging ideas and I mean that was kind of a relationship we had for like 4 years in the beginning. That's kind of and we were both getting work at the same time, working for the same magazines and same things. And then what happened? Advertising started to come into the picture, and that kind of happened also. I had an agent a few years out of school that didn't work out. I had it for like 6 months, so I didn't really like that situation. And then, but that's kind of where things started for me. It was business and computer magazines.
And did you get to have something like a sketchbook group or, with your artistic friends, or was it mainly just with Peter or,
No, we had other groups and they always had, I joined the Society of Illustrators at the time, and I was a member, for 15 years after I joined, and then I stopped and I went back. I'm a member again. But, they had meetings and, you can go to the shows and you networked and you got to meet art directors there in that way. You submitted artwork to the shows. I used to get artwork in all the time in the books. It was great.
Yeah.
And the Graphic Artists Guild also had parties, and they had, they were kind of like portfolio review parties.
Yeah.
That was another organization that was pro illustration, trying to help illustrators and on the business side and getting young people together and exchanging ideas. That was another one. And I remember having portfolio reviews where we're showing art directors who would come, with, a little young illustrator showing him my work, and you're hoping that he likes your work but that happened too. So that was kind of a nice thing.
Oh, that's cool.
I remember meeting Sam Viviano there. He was he's now the art director at Mad Magazine.
Yeah.
I think he's left being the art director, or he's going to, because they're moving out to California. So, Warner Brothers bought them, and they're moving out of New York.
Wow.
So it'll be interesting. Yeah, but yeah.
And if you're thinking now about the portfolios and character design, I'm sure you saw many portfolios, reviews and stuff nowadays. Do you see something which young people are doing, like a mistake over and over, like you can see it more across more portfolios? If you can give maybe some advice.
It's interesting because I did portfolio reviews while I was at CTN. So I must have did 20 of them. I did it for 2 days. And what I started to see, it was a small sample, was that people are getting information from the same sources and they're not being as unique as they could be.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because you see always the same thing. Yeah.
They don't all look the same, but there's something about it that tends to be generic, and the point of view isn't there. Yeah. And it takes time to develop a point of view. It just doesn't happen. So that's kind of the thing I noticed with young people, and I see that on Instagram too. The people that the young people admire are mostly the people that develop their own vision.
Yeah.
They have their own personality in their drawing, their own point of view. They know how to tell a story. That's the goal of them, of a young artist. But I think there's maybe something that happens with doing things digital that maybe makes things look the same.
You might have more like influences in the same way, maybe because a lot of people started at the same time, and then they kind of influence each other, and no one actually looks at like old masters or. So you just compare yourself to everyone who is online. So that might be more that just the digital, because I think you can create not the same thing, but you can have the same vision communicated with the traditional and digital, I guess.
Right.
But so maybe what are the things you learn about the storytelling which are kind of the most important for you?
The things that I learned?
Yeah.
I teach in different classes also, and What I try to always stress is that if you're a student, you can't be living in a shell. You can't be living in a shell and only looking at people on the internet. You have to go out and observe life, observe things that are going on. There's a story every time you sit down and observe people at a shopping mall. If you're in a bar, if you're somewhere at a sports event, there's always something going on between characters.
Yeah.
Always be on alert and live your life every day and try to find out these peculiar things that happen between people. And as you're looking at these peculiar things, I always give an example of, if you're in a coffee shop and you see somebody that's a character, and I'm not talking sitting down in a coffee shop with a sketchbook and within a minute you're sitting down drawing that person. I'm talking about experiencing the whole situation and you're sitting there observing. Before you're touching a pencil or a pen, you're just observing. You're not worried about drawing. You're just looking at the characters. You're finding a couple of characters that you like. There's a conversation happening between the characters. You're noticing what kind of conversation. Is it a joyful conversation or is it a angry? Are they arguing? How does this conversation affect the person sitting next to them? What's going to happen if somebody from the other table who's getting annoyed by that loud conversation, what if they get up and do something to stop that? Yeah, you're making up stories. It's not happening, but you can make scenarios and envision things that happen before the act of something happened, right?
Yeah.
So when you're doing a story, when you're telling stories, and I've been telling stories with illustration forever, and so it's kind of a natural progression for me to do animation. But when you're telling stories, you can do the act of something happening, which is somebody's catching a ball. You can do before the act, which is what's the guy doing before he catches the ball, and then after the act, what does he do after he caught the ball and he's flying in the air and falls, and how do the people react around him in all three of those situations? So you have to pick, if you're doing an illustration, you have to pick one thing that best describes that unique point of view, that unique moment in time, that best describes how you want to say. See, that what you want to say, that develops your point of view. Not everybody's going to pick the same thing I pick, nor what you pick.
Yeah.
You might decide that doing the sequence afterwards is more interesting to you.
Yeah, definitely.
But there's so many opportunities you have in that span of something happening.
And do you also, kind of note down things when you are somewhere, like, oh, I really like the hair shape or props they are around them, like that would be cool in the story.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the body shapes and the variations of differences in people. If you're noticing the slender woman sitting down or walking in the mall, she has a dog. Her dog is slender, and another person comes and he's walking down the street, facing her, and he's a big guy and he's got a big dog. So there's stories to be said, in everything that you're looking at. What's going to happen when they connect? Are the dogs going to like each other? It may not be happening in real life, but if you're a student or a young illustrator, and you start observing things at a young age, it's going to be part of the way you see things. You won't be able to look at things the same, like a normal person won't notice. But if you're an artist and you want to develop a vision, then that's kind of a good way to get yourself into a mode where you're growing constantly.
Yeah, definitely. Because then if you're creating already a world as well for your characters and collaborating with others, then you can bounce off the ideas and create some other emotional situations or the activities. Yeah. And so how do you kind of keep the balance of the reality and maybe fiction when you're creating the stories? And because you want to, I guess, keep them relatable to the viewer. So maybe how do you combine the inspiration and the fiction? How do you keep that balance?
Um, the things that I make up,
Yeah,
in other words.
yeah,
I think that your fiction becomes what you do, so it becomes your reality.
yeah,
Just because you thought it up doesn't mean that you can't make it believable in your artwork, in your drawing. Um, if I'm envisioning these things happen and I take note and I jot down little thumbnails in my sketchbook of what I'm thinking, and there's a professional job that comes up that's perfect for that situation, then I'm going to try to use it. So it's my fiction, things of making up story, just as if somebody made up an animation. If an animator is doing a sequence with one of the characters posing and doing something, essentially what Ollie Johnson talked about. He's designing characters with movement, but when he's doing drawings of dopey drawings in Snow White, and you're watching him make this character do different things in different situations. He's inventing that stuff, but it's based on knowledge of what he's inventing.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's his reality. He's making this character be as real as he can, even though it's an invented character.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So it's
I don't know, am I
mostly
answering that? Yeah.
so it's mostly the emotions and the behavior of the character which the viewer can relate to, and then the rest of the things you can adjust the shapes and I don't know the other moments, right?
Right. Getting the essence of the character is the ultimate. Trying to figure out what that character is about, and then bringing emotion and everything into the character. I mean, that's a different story as far as illustrating. I've always been excited about gestures and expression and attitudes, and because that's the story. When somebody is slumped over in a chair, like sad, with a drink in their hand, I want to get that across. If somebody is drinking a milkshake, and they're happy, and this person weighs 400 pounds and he's really happy, and he's dancing around, and so I want to get that across. So I can visualize the expression. I'm trying to figure out, and what helps you get that expression is doing the act before the act and after the act. It gives you that it's actually like a little storyboard sequence of what is to come. So it's up to you to pick that perfect moment.
Do you still work like that when you are working on some project and you want to communicate one visual story, like one image? Do you still like sketch the other ideas?
Sometimes it comes to you quickly because I've kind of trained myself to think that way.
Yeah.
But very often I'm looking at something I do in the article. I'm always thinking about what's the best time, what's the best moment in time this illustration, what should it live in? What period should that live in? Before, middle, or end? And I'm always thinking that because it helps me solve the problem.
Yeah.
Kind of resolves, what the best time is.
Yeah, and then you have the stronger illustration and a
Right.
better impact on the
Right.
someone looking at it. And so when you are like working on the projects now or something which is coming up in the future, what is going on in your head when you have to decide which one to do? Because you cannot do everything at once, right?
It usually solves itself because one eventually stands out. There's something that stands out that says that's it, and then that's what you should strive for. And maybe you have to tweak an expression or an attitude or a gesture, and that's just refining the idea. You already have the idea, but your sketches will get yourself closer and closer to that direction.
Yeah. And I mean also for a project like bigger projects, if someone would want you to work on a movie or on a book cover or something else, how do you decide which project to take and which one maybe to say no to?
Well, right now I'm really, really interested in more movie things. Although I have a book that I have to do. I can't really talk about it other than it's for Disney Publishing. Um, that's going to be in my next 6 months. I'll be doing that.
Oh,
So
perfect.
a
So,
lot of drawings, and a cover. So yeah,
so it's more decision making. What is closer to your heart? What do you want to kind of? What is your current goal? What do you want to work on? Right?
yeah, that too. I mean, you got to make financial choices. I mean, there's definitely money is definitely something that you have to think about.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
definitely.
I wish it wasn't, but art. I think every artist does. I guess most artists anyway.
Yeah.
Um, um, and then I think of things that are good for me. Am I going to get a project that I enjoy doing? Am I going to get a project that's correct? Do I have, I usually get freedom with my work. There
Yeah.
was a time where I didn't. You kind of have to earn freedom.
It takes time.
But yeah, but yeah, I mean, there's factors, but I like to do things that take me in a direction that's exciting, for me to do.
Yeah.
And at this point in my career, pretty much everybody that hires me knows what I do. They're not going to hire me to do something that I'm not good for.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Which
I
might
mean,
have
otherwise,
happened in the past, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, it happens when you're young because you're
Yeah.
trying to find yourself. Where do you fit? What excites you? And, early on, I had jobs where art directors used to art direct me and say, this is what we want. And what happens is the more you do, you maybe do their idea and then you give them 5 other ideas that are better than their idea. And you said, well, here's your idea. But here's some other things you might want to see. It might be an option. And then 99% of the time, they'll pick one of the options,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, because you won't spend as much time on the one they want. The one, that was my trick. Yeah, I wouldn't spend as much time. I do better drawings on the other ones.
yeah. Yeah, because like that's the other one is a better choice.
I said, do you really want this?
Are you sure? Yeah.
Uh, but it's kind of what you figure out at the time.
Along the way, yeah. And
Yeah.
so, what about now? Like, what are your main income streams? What do you live from mainly? Is it, the illustration books, or do you combine different things?
My career went like this. I was an editorial illustrator for 90 or 80% of my work was editorial illustration
Yeah.
till the 90s, till like the early 90s. I started doing children's books. Then all of a sudden it became like, 75%, 25% books, my income level. And then during the 90s, there was more, yes, there's more children's books. I had opportunities to go into the animation world when in the 90s when it was chaos and when everything was happening with the animation companies, people were losing and they were looking for outside talent. And at the time, geez, I have a book coming out and I have another book in the making. I wanted to be a book illustrator. And I had a wife that was pregnant and we just built a house and in the country. And, so a lot of decisions were made and I ended up not doing that animation thing. I was doing more books at the time. And animation started to happen later in the 90s, getting calls. And in the late 90s. And then, the 2000s, things started to evolve. And then CTN gave me an opportunity to pursue that.
Yeah.
And that's, and all of a sudden, I'm getting out more opportunities. So it's kind of nice.
So it's good to go for conventions if someone would like to do something like you do now, like when you are their role model. Yeah, they love your characters and illustrations. What would you kind of advise them to do or start with?
Not so much getting job stuff, but more about, bettering your skills.
Yeah.
And, it's so easy now to look online and be totally blown away by all the people that are incredible. I mean, I look online and it's like, I better go back to work. And I've been doing this forever. And which is good. I want to have that same kind of, I want to be inspired constantly. And I'm constantly inspired by, young people that are doing great stuff. It's like, it's just outrageous. And what's different now, and is that you have the opportunity now to not have that mystery of what goes on behind the animation world. You know, when I was growing up, it's like I saw Walt Disney once every 3 times a year, went behind the scenes, and I was like going berserk. And now you can call somebody up or chat with them or take a class with your favorite artist. Yeah. And it's crazy. I mean, I never had that opportunity. You know, it's kind of a nice thing. I kind of found my way by basically making mistakes and going in the wrong direction and doing this and just trying harder and working harder.
Yeah.
And so it's a totally different world.
Yeah. So
I experimented with watercolors and acrylics and traditional materials, and to me, it's harder for me to paint on digital. You know, I do it, but it's harder for me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's a change.
It's different. It's different. But a lot of my digital work looks like my watercolors.
Yeah, but that's really hard to do, to make the digital artwork to look traditional. So
yeah,
amazing.
Yes, yeah. But I'm glad, you know. But it's how I see it. I layer paint. You know, it's kind of how I see things. But so you know, just better your craft. I think totally be aware of what things are happening around you. You know, don't bury your head into your phone and your iPad. Watch and look at the world and try to bring some of the things that you see in nature and the world, people, interactions, and try to bring some of these things that we talked about before into your work, because that's where your point of view develops.
Yeah.
And I think when you develop a unique vision of how you see things, then you're bringing something unusual that's unique to yourself into your creation. Yeah. And, you know, I see people do fan work and stuff, which is fine, but, you know, keep building up your own personality into your drawing. And the only way you do that is observation, really.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
Yeah, so, just to see basically how you see the world around you, right?
Right. How would you answer a problem? What's going to happen next when you're looking at something happening in real life?
Yeah.
Play stories, you know, make up stories. If you want to be a storyteller, then you got to be thinking about telling stories all the time.
And
it's not something that happens once in a while when you have a job. It's not something that happens when you get a job and you're thinking, geez, now I got to tell a story. It's, you know, you get the job and then you know what you would do.
Yeah.
You know, based on things that you went through and saw and drew and past jobs and how you think. That's how it evolves. That's how your work evolves into something that's special. You know, it's different.
And when was this aha moment for you? Do you remember? Like when you were like, okay, I really have to create stories in my illustrations.
I mean, I think that happened like in the early 80s. I think that happened in school.
Yeah.
I had a drawing teacher that used to stress, and I spoke about him before, at Parsons, that used to stress, you know, getting to the essence of what you're drawing, getting to the, you know, drawing the model, but it's not about, you know, so much. And he said this before I learned the other things that animators say. He was saying, you know, it's not about what the character looks like as much as the emotion you're getting from what the character's doing. And you know, certain things stuck with me. And it's just different things that he said is being repeated throughout every learning process I had throughout my career. You know, like Ollie Johnson would say, it's not about what the character looks like. It's about what the character's thinking.
Yeah.
You know?
So you can see.
So I mean, if they said if you can answer that question, then you know you have that character somehow. So you're trying to get the essence of that character, and it's kind of a different way of saying what my college drawing teacher said. It's just a different way, and you know all the best character designers now understand that, and they do it. They're not doing just the look of the character in a stiff pose. they're making a gesture, they're doing every little tweak, little subtlety that the character has, whether it's holding up a pinky or a gesture or little tweak of the eyebrow, has to do with who that character is. So it's all complete into one. And all the best understand that. I'm not really saying anything new or unique. I'm just saying that that's integral part of developing your point of view, is to study that.
Yeah, it's always good to remind also ourselves, right? Because sometimes we are, I mean, at least like when you are starting out, you are kind of stuck with like, oh, I want to have this like perfect, I want to have a good anatomy, good colors, and then you can forget about, you know, like actually the expression, and if you don't start with it right away.
Right. Well, I think that if at a young age, if you start to develop your thinking on a positive direction that you're never pleased with, I'm never pleased with things. I never look at my work and I say, wow, that's it. That's the ultimate drawing. I always see things that are wrong, always. And I think that if you can have that quality that you're always looking for something that's better, or the next thing that you can outdo the other thing. And you're looking at life like that when you're observing people. I think you're always on a path that's going to be an upward trend. It may not be that kind of trend. It might be like slow and steady, which is what you want. I think.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree.
Yeah.
And have you ever felt like lost or something when you were like, okay, I'm not sure if I'm on the right path, or kind of like a struggles in your art career?
Lost, I don't think I was ever lost so much. I was always pretty busy, so I didn't really have time to think about being lost.
Yeah, kind of like if I'm in the right career path, you know.
Well, I did during the time animation went to animation. The animation in the 90s moved on, because there was a turning point where I had a time. I had friends that went toward the animation, people I knew, and I stayed with the book and illustration world. And I remember sending my work just to feel it out, because everybody was doing the feelers, and sent my portfolio. And I did, I had a phone conversation with a recruiter at Disney. I could have gotten a job at Disney at the time, but I'd have to go there. She said, if you could come here, we would have something for you. And I remember the phone call, and I couldn't do it at the time. I had change in my life. All this stuff happened, and a kid on the way. I just had it. My wife just had a baby, and so I couldn't make that move at the time. But they're all grown up now, so I'm trying to do that.
Yeah.
So never. Yeah. So what else?
If you have some struggles along the way that you've felt like, okay, maybe there is some learning from this, or like a takeaway.
Just it's really hard to make all the right choices on everything all the time. So I mean, there's been different times where I've taken the wrong jobs, that weren't right, or whatever. But as far as career path, I'm comfortable with the way it's kind of a slow growth that happens. I mean, I'm happy to say I wasn't a flash in the pan. I'm still working, and it's a steady thing. It's a steady growth. Even now with animation, it's, every time I go to CTN, things happen.
Yeah.
It's just a steady, persistent thing, and I don't get tired of it. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the next thing, the next project.
Yeah. And so how does your normal day look like now? Maybe how many hours a day do you draw, or do you do something daily which contributes to your success, like, I don't know, nature or meditation or something like that?
I don't really do things that are habitual. And there are times where I'm working and I just work. I'm constantly working. And then there are other times where, I don't have a job or work. and I go golfing. I used to ski. I have a bad knee now, but I used to ski a lot. Go for hikes and do that. Travel. Uh, do things that are based around some of my work things.
Yeah.
Like right now, I have a busy period coming up, a lot of things happening, and I know I'm going to be here for 6 months and just focusing. And then my ritual is going to be basically working as much as I have to get done till I'm tired. I don't say I'm working 9 to 5. I can't. I've never been somebody to do that. I wake up sometimes in the morning, and usually my work time is better if I start at 10 rather than 8. But I've started at 8. I just don't get as much done. I get more done when I know that I'm motivated at that particular time. I could do more in 3 hours than it would 24 hours if I'm at that right frame of mind. To get there, I don't have the answer. It just, sometimes it doesn't happen. Other times, it's like, I'm ready. I feel like doing it now. I'm ready. And, I wish I had the answer, but I've never had that schedule thing that made me think of my best time. When I was younger, you have a lot of work. And I remember my record, I tell this to my kids, and they're like, yeah. My record for staying up, not sleeping, was 3 consecutive days.
What?
Yeah. So I honestly, these are like, I'm doing like magazine covers. And I remember one time I was doing a Barron's magazine. That was the last job at the end of the 3 days.
Yeah.
And I remember doing it. I was, like loaded up on coffee, hallucinating. I don't remember, but I did it, and it came out, and I saw it on the newsstand a week later, a couple days later. I was like, wow, that's pretty good. I mean, I liked it.
Or more like, your brain is not functioning anymore. Oh, I did that? I don't remember.
Yeah, but you do what you have to do. I can't do that now. I mean, I would, physically, I would get tired, But I used to be able to do that, and I look back, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's crazy, Deadlines.
Definitely, because then, when you get more tired, right, then how do you keep on going? Or it was just because you wanted to...
Coffee.
Yeah, okay.
Coffee. I don't know. You just did it. I guess the motivation of knowing that something was due. And, I went through, a few years like that, doing as much work as I could. And it didn't happen like continuously. Like that. It would happen maybe, there'd be a week here and there that were, you didn't want to turn down the money, you didn't want to turn down the job because it was interesting, and you didn't want to turn down the exposure.
Yeah.
So you would do the best, maybe you would catnap a half hour here and there. But yeah, and it's probably a lot of illustrators that do that too.
Yeah. When you have
I don't know if they do it now, but back then back when I'm talking, there was just a lot of work. Everybody had a lot of work. And, it's a little different now because the internet took some of that work away from the artists. So.
Yeah, and do you have your studio in the house, or do you travel somewhere?
I have a house over there, and it's connected to the studio. And I built the studio in 2001.
Oh wow! So it's still quite new.
I moved into the studio in 2001. It's still no 17 years. So
yeah. Well, I mean, still like.
Yeah. I built it like before 9/11.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Like right before 9/11.
That
happened.
Still feels like yesterday.
Yeah. And if it happened after 9/11, because at that time work dried up for a while.
Yeah. Okay.
For a lot of artists, and I remember being out of work for 3 months at that time, and I know people that were out of work for a year that just couldn't get work, and things were just in chaos, so if I didn't do it before that, I wouldn't have had the studio. Oh, by the way, I'm in the new book, the studio book with Greg Preston.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I haven't seen the book yet.
Yeah. So I'm in there, studio.
Oh, nice. Do you have other books you would recommend, like maybe with your art and aside of your books, of course, something you would give as a present to like artists, or like this is a book you cannot live without?
Oh, if you're an artist, my number one, it's a really motivational book to me, and I've had this book for, I don't know, 30 years, 25 years. It's Ronald Searle. It's basically his life, during the time where he did his war drawings, and it's called From Kwai and Back.
Yeah.
Ronald Searle's work,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, these were his drawings he did when he enlisted into the Royal Army, British Army, and then he was a prisoner of war. He was an art student. 19 years old, he had enlisted. 20 years old, he was captured. It's just a very inspirational book because it shows you his path that kept him alive. Basically, his drawing kept him alive.
Wow. Yeah.
During the time he was in POW, and he used to smuggle drawing. He used to draw on everything, and hide the drawings because his life was in danger if somebody caught him.
Yeah.
It's just incredible, But you understand how his drawings changed over that period from when he was a art student to when he was captured, and that period kind of helped him find a voice. It helped him focus in on that really dark thing that he kept on seeing throughout his career.
Yeah.
So it was a horror that he was able to benefit from, and it's motivational, it's inspirational.
Yeah.
I never met Ronald Searle. I would have loved to have met him.
Oh, wow.
I own
Okay.
some of his originals, but I never met him.
So that will be definitely on my list on
Yep.
books. I haven't get that one yet. So yeah. And what about your future projects? And I would like to know, for like 5 to 10 years, what would you be see yourself like working on? What would be your dream scenario? And also, what would you like to be remembered for in like 100 years?
100 years, boy.
Yeah.
Boy. Well, now I'm working on a book that's going to be due in, I think, 6 months or 8 months. It's for Disney Publishing. I can't talk about it. So, NDA agreement, can't talk about that.
Yes.
And I did, a few months ago, I did drawings for an animation studio. Probably shouldn't mention the name, but they're working on one project. If it gets green lit, I was told I'd be part of the team.
Oh, nice.
Doing character work, and they have 4 big projects on the burner, ready to go that they want me to participate in.
Oh, great.
But that's now, and you never know. And I met somebody at CTN from China, who is developing projects in China that is very interested in my character work.
Oh, nice.
So those 3 things or 4 things are happening, or who knows if they're going to happen.
You will see.
Editorial work. I have an agent that does my editorial work and advertising, and that's only a portion of what I do now. I used to do strictly editorial and a lot of advertising, and now it just comes in when it comes in, and that's kind of how I deal with that. And as I said, I was doing a children's book, but that's basically where I am now with work.
And then
And I have a bunch of things that I want to do. I want to get back to doing more original paintings rather than digital, know. So, I brought up my old drawing boards, and I'm ready to stretch paper and staple it and my arches paper, and ready to get back into that. I just have to. Maybe I should have a schedule.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll work this time. It hasn't worked yet, but maybe it'll work this time. So that's a goal too.
And about 100 years, the epic question, like, what would you like to be remembered for?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to remember me. I don't know. If I'm remembered by my family, that's great. I'm happy to be a good guy, and my kids liking me, and a good family guy. That would be please me enough. As far as artistic, we'll see. I'm not finished yet. We'll see what happens. hopefully there's better things happening in the future. I'm in a couple of books, art books, probably more than a couple, but one in particular. It's it's like the history of illustration book. I'm in that during the 1990s, like artists that made an impact in the 90s. So I'm in there. I don't know what it means,
Perfect.
but yeah, but I'm
That's
in
good.
that. Um, and whatever else happens, I'm supposed to be donating artwork to Society of Illustrators, so they can put their artwork in a room that nobody sees, I guess, for a long time. So I'm not sure what to give them.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
that's
get something good, but I don't know what, because I'm not finished looking at some of my good things.
yeah, hard choice.
Yeah, so I gotta figure that out. They've been bugging me for a couple of years. So
Yeah, I'm looking
uh,
forward to see your future projects, definitely, because yeah, I'm sure I will see you more around as well as you mentioned in animation, and let's see, where in all the credits you will be, and then I would be like, yeah.
yeah, I mean it's exciting because there's always a growth opportunity somewhere,
Yeah,
and I think my work is getting better all the time. I don't think I go backwards,
yeah,
and it just seeing all the excitement and meeting all the younger people that are in animation, it's just motivating. It's inspiring to
that's
me.
great.
And
Yeah.
when I go to CTN and walk around and mingle and meet new friends, and it's just so much fun to see all that energy. It's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And before we say goodbye and finish the interview, maybe you can share like last piece of advice or key takeaway, and then we will slowly finish.
Last piece of advice to somebody who is not to a younger illustrator or animator, would be to be a student of life. Definitely don't close yourself off to just looking at what's online. Travel, experience things in your life, be observant, look at people, look at characters constantly, make up stories as you're looking at them, play with things. Always say to yourself, if you're looking at a scene or a crowd scene or conversation, what if something else happens to make these people react to something else in the conversation?
Yeah.
Back to the idea that I was talking about earlier, there's always a story. When is the perfect time of the story? Is it the beginning? Is it the part where the action happens in the story? Is it the part before the action happens? Is it the part after the action happens? Your decision will help you develop your point of view, perspective on how you see things.
Yeah.
And always look, absorb, and work hard. That's about it.
Definitely. And yeah, it was so great and so inspirational. So thank you so much again for joining us here.
Thanks for inviting me. It was great. It was really nice.
Thank you again so much and taking time from your busy schedule. And yeah, so a lot of really great useful tips. And thanks everyone who joined today, and see you in the next episode.
Great. Thank you. Bye.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe because I post new videos every week. I will be also super happy if you let me know your thoughts in comments and give the video a thumbs up. You can find all the resources mentioned in this episode at artsideoflife.com. Just type a guest name in the search bar. There is also a couple of free artist resources ready for you. So if you want to listen to the interviews on the go too, make sure to check out the podcast at artsideoflife.com/podcast. Continue to inspire each other, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye!